you all for being here. I wanted to start by introducing our host for the day. This is Stephanie Jansky. She is the Director of Programming for the City Club of Cleveland. And I was going to give her a few minutes to say hello and tell you a little bit about this place that we're in. So, Stephanie, we'll let you go first so you can get back to your job. But then, yeah.
This is way more fun to hang out with all of you. Well, welcome to Cleveland and welcome to the City Club. She said I'm Stephanie Jansky. I'm the Director of Programming. Our CEO, Dan Moulthrop, is currently somewhere between Berlin and Cleveland, finishing up a Marshall Fellowship with the German Marshall Fund, so he sends his regards as well. If you're not familiar with the City Club, we are one of the nation's oldest free speech forums. We were founded in the progressive era in 1912, when many cities had city clubs, which at the time was a place for mostly older white guys to sit around and talk politics and policy and solve all the world's problems. Most of the city clubs closed during the Great Depression. Many never reopened, and so we are one of the ones that's been around the longest and has been the most continuously operating. We have never shut our doors. This is not our original location. We have moved about 3 or 4 times in our 106 years, but we've been here for over 20 years at this point. And this mural, which over here to my right, has sort of followed us as well. It is a famous mural by an African-American artist named Elmer Brown, and it sort of depicts what he thought free speech, what he thought free speech should be depicted of pictorially, and that's kind of followed us around. We are most well known for hosting and being the place where Robert Kennedy gave his mindless menace of violence speech after Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. That speech was only 10 minutes, and he did not feature a question and answer period, which nearly all of our forums do. We've also hosted the last 6 consecutive sitting presidents. That streak might be broken this time around, as President Trump has not accepted our invitation to come speak. But we have featured the last 6. Obama was the last one who came, and all of those presidents and all of our speakers take unrehearsed, unscripted, live questions from the audience. So if you come to a City Club forum or see anything online, you will see our speakers giving a talk, and then we have folks with microphones in the audience just walking around, and you can ask a question. So it could be a City Club board member, it could be a high school student, it could be anyone in the community addressing a university president, a scholar, an author, a politician. So that's one of the hallmarks of City Club programming. All of our programs are archived. I say that all the ones that Maria has been able to get footage of, because we have had 100 years of these, are archived on our website and provided free to the community. There's no paywall required. So if you go in and want to Google Bill Clinton or a professor or a leader, a thought leader, you can watch their talks, kind of like TED Talks. So the City Club and VFA relationship started about 4 years ago when we hired our first VFA fellow. We have had 2, and it may seem a little strange that a century-old free speech nonprofit would have a VFA fellow, but we'd like to think of ourselves as kind of being this sort of old historic institution with a very entrepreneurial spirit. We've had to evolve. Keeping our mission strong, but evolve how we approach different audiences, how we embrace the digital view, and we've really enjoyed having the VFA fellows come in and share their expertise and their ideas with how to kind of bridge the gap between our legacy, our older members, new audiences, new digital tools, keeping it accessible, affordable, and equitable for all who want to enjoy City Club programming. So this is great. We've had Faye Walker and Julia Wong. Julia says hello from Austin. She's on a vacation and coming back, but we're really thrilled you're here and we're able to host you in our space. And if you have any questions, I will be here for a little while, and a lot of our staff are here as well. So enjoy your time in Cleveland.
Thank you. And I was also going to say the City Club does engage the entrepreneurial and innovation community in Cleveland. And so the first panel I actually came to here was actually a panel of startup leaders, and
with Andrew Yang.
That was before my time. This was the panel with I think there was Jennifer Stapleton. It was a Burton D. Morgan anniversary.
Yes.
So anyway, they're very engaged in that community as well, which also makes it a compelling placement for a fellow. So thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for hosting us. Let's say thank you to the City Club.
I need to hand you the mic. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. It's okay. It's your house. One way we can say thank you to our hosts is by being mindful of our space. Please, when you leave, take your trash with you, put it in appropriate places. Do not make them not want to invite us back again. So that's my plug for being good stewards of our space. So Charlie and I are going to introduce ourselves, and then you're going to introduce yourself. You probably all know us, but just in case, I'm Elizabeth Brake. I am the Senior Director of Company Partnerships for Venture for America. I do many things, but the thing that's most relevant to you is that I run VFA Match. So that is what we are all here to talk about today. Charlie, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, this is Charlie Odom. I can pretty much guarantee you've all heard from me by now. Welcome to Cleveland, welcome to VFA. We are so excited to have you here. I am from North Carolina originally. I lived in Baltimore and Philadelphia, and now I live in New York. And my preferred pronouns are he, his, and him. And yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah, I am also from North Carolina. But Cleveland is home now for the duration. I can't really imagine leaving, so welcome to my newly adopted hometown. And I also am she, her, and hers. So now it's your turn. You are going to introduce yourselves. You're going to find a partner. You're going to say your name. You're going to say what your pronouns are. You're going to say where you traveled from. But also, you're going to have 8 minutes. And what I want is for this room to go through this exercise of introducing yourselves to each other and figure out who the person is in this room who traveled the furthest to be here today. So I'm going to set a timer. I'm going to fiddle with my, oops. Don't start yet. Don't start yet. No cheating. No cheating by starting yet. All right, you have 8 minutes. Introduce yourselves and figure out who came here from the furthest, starting now. And move around. How are they going to do this not getting up? Yes, get up, figure it out.
Hi, I'm Charlie. Imran?
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
He knows him, and St. Louis.
St. Louis. Okay, great.
Yeah, I think we have a call. Actually, you probably don't remember. You probably get familiar with it, but I filled out the call sheet,
Do the call next week or
Tuesday.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. So I just wanted to have a conversation.
Look forward to it. All right, I'll see ya.
You know, I feel it.
Haley, right?
Yes,
Yes,
Charlie.
Charlie. Yeah.
Nice to see you
Hi,
again.
Chan. Chan?
Yeah.
Hi, good to see you again. Hi, Rana, good to see you. Where are you coming from?
San Antonio?
San Antonio.
That's far.
Penn State. Penn State. Okay, so a little further.
Yeah, a little bit further.
Yeah.
She, her, hers. Yeah, she, her, hers as well. Cool. Okay, cool.
She or her as well?
Yes.
Or great.
I don't like doing it super long.
Hi, by the way, I'm Charlie again. Hey, my name's Daniel. Hi. Where are you from? I'm from Philadelphia. Okay, oh, where are you from? So, not that bad. Yeah.
From Philly? I'm in Pittsburgh too. Detroit. What did you go to? Western?
Okay. And Megan. Nice to meet you.
Bryant.
Hi, I'm Charlie, by the way.
Ruby.
Ruby. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
Ruby. It's true. You got me there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi. It's great to see you. I met you before too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Open it
Got a
up.
freestyle in the middle if you want to
I'm
join it.
glad you were able to make it here.
Not yet, later. Bryant.
Bryant?
Javier.
Javier?
Yeah.
Brittany. Nice to meet you.
Where are you guys coming from?
New Orleans.
Gotcha.
You guys
From LA.
LA? Oh, okay. Okay.
So she's winning me.
I was gonna say, you're probably gonna.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, I'm coming from Ann Arbor, which is like 2.5 hours away. Not bad. Not bad.
Hi, I'm Charlie.
Y'all are about halfway through.
Right? I interviewed. Yes. Surprise.
I saw you walking in, I was like,
Like,
fine, this time, everything's fine.
Charlotte originally. Yeah. Oh, really? Oh, did you grow up there or what?
Yeah, I went to Providence High School.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
Where'd you go? I knew it. My mom taught there. I almost went there.
Okay.
To AG Middle School.
Oh, cool. My brother went to AT Middle School actually. So yeah.
Oh, small world.
What year did you graduate? Are you graduating college now or?
Yeah, in May. So I graduated 2015.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, glad you're here.
Me too.
Love the energy.
They're talking to each other. They're not just sitting and staring at us. Each other out or something, but no.
Yeah, they're like, no, we already got ends, you know?
Yeah. But not like figuring out who got here from California or who got here from. Also, I've looked at all of these people's match profile pictures, like every single one of them.
Yep. It's funny because kind of like some of them look extra thin, kind of like you think I Skype interviewed you. I think I did a follow-up call with you or something like that. You know? And some of them they're kind of like, yeah, Charlie, good to see you again. We talked last week.
Yeah, yeah.
Hi. I mean, it's a big city. Welcome. I'm Charlie. Hi. Good to see you, Jamie.
Hi, good to see you.
Jamie, right now you throw your bag down somewhere. We're literally just, for a couple more minutes, go around, say your name, your pronouns, and like where you're from. All right. Cool. All right.
One minute warning. If you don't think you know who came here from the furthest, start finding out. Time's up. Clap once if you can hear me. Clap twice if you can hear me. All right, let's find our seats. Nominations. Who came here from the farthest? Don't get to volunteer yourself. Got to be someone you talk to. Brittany, where'd you come from?
LA.
Anyone can beat that?
Josh, maybe.
Josh, where'd you come from? San Francisco. What you got back there? I'm sorry? San Diego. All right, you might win. All right. So hopefully you've all had a chance to get to know each other a little bit, feeling a little looser. This is not intended to be the formal, super stressful day. That's tomorrow. Today you're among friends. So what did I do with the, helps if I have my, this is better. All right, we are going to jump straight into the meat of why you're here. I also want to give you an overview of what to expect for the next hour and 10 minutes. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some specific interview strategies. And these interview strategies are things that we are suggesting to you based on our experience coaching hundreds of fellows. What you're about to do, this entire match and job fair process feels like a lot. It feels you're maybe a little excited, you're probably kind of nervous, you're trying to figure out how you want to do this. Hundreds of fellows have done it before you. We've gotten them all through it. We're going to get you through it too. Part of it is going to be by equipping you with some interview strategies that are going to help with that. Then the next thing we're going to do is move into a section where we talk about the kinds of behaviors and commitments that we want from you through the match process in order to have you be your best selves, put your best foot forward to your company partners, and also enable us to help you as much as we possibly can. And so by following some of the norms and commitments and recommendations that we're going to ask of you, you're going to be able to set yourself up for success in ways that allow us to do our best for you. And then at the end of the day, there's going to be a half-hour panel where we're going to be joined by some Cleveland fellows and alumni. They're going to take the mic and they're going to lead and they're going to answer some questions and talk about their experience in Cleveland, and they're also going to be open to hearing from you. Ask them your questions, anything you want to know about being here, they're happy to tell you. So that's what's happening, and then after this, we're going to move out into the hallway where the City Club has very generously hosted us for a happy hour. So we'll hold that happy hour there. The VFA team members who are visiting will be here, and we'll all just kind of mingle and get to know each other, and then tomorrow we'll move into the job fair. Questions about expectations for the day before we move in? No, we good? I almost never talk with a mic. This is very strange. All right, so we're going to start with some interviewing basics. There's probably a lot here you've seen before. Can I get like a volunteer to read out the first one for me? Anyone, popcorn style? Go for it.
Number 1, dress well. Business casual for most startups, but do your research.
So many of you got an email from me that said that the dress code for today was smart casual. And I've had some people be like, what is that? For the Birmingham Job Fair, I had someone who was from California say, is this a weird East Coast thing? I don't know what smart casual is. It might be a weird East Coast thing. I don't know. It's the only frame of reference I have. But smart casual in some ways is exactly what I'm wearing. The jeans, the blazer, the nice shirt. Many of you, pretty much all of you, are doing that already. It's not super dressy, it's not super formal, but it is put together. You would not walk into a smart casual environment with your sweatpants. You would not come in here with a hoodie typically. Like you're not hanging out with your friends, you're going out to dinner with your friends' parents, right? Like that level of put together but not over the top. That is going to be that or just slightly above that. So maybe not jeans, but maybe a nice pair of pants, a skirt, khakis for guys, those kinds of things, button-down shirts, typically not a tie in a startup context. That's the kind of thing you're typically going for a startup interview. Startup companies are typically a little casual, and so you don't want necessarily to be massively overdressed, nor do you want to be massively underdressed, and when in doubt, do a little more. But that's generally what you're looking for. I will also give you a tip that you should do your research into the startup, because there are startups that are dressier that we work with, and there are startups that when I go talk to them as a representative of VFA, I would not go in this pair of jeans. So I'm going to give you a tip about some things you might look for when you're trying to decide. If you are dealing with a healthcare company, it may be dressier. If you are dealing with an organization that is affiliated with a Fortune 500 corporation or a hospital, it's probably a little dressier. Think about who their external partners are, and if you were representing them as an external partner, what would you wear to work that day? And that's probably what you want to wear for your interview. Questions about that? Yes?
So since we're going through quite a few different interviews tomorrow, would it be better to just dress as well as possible and work your way down?
Yes. Yeah, for sure for tomorrow, but also just like thinking about this when you're packing for your site visits or when you're getting dressed for a Skype interview and you're trying to decide whether the polo or the button down is the right thing to wear. You should probably go with the button down. Those kinds of things. But yeah, for tomorrow, like in the email I sent you, I recommended something like what you did for selection day, more or less. That's about right for tomorrow. Who wants to read out number 2 for me? Yes.
Number 2, shake hands.
Yes, this is a skill many of you should have perfected already, but if shaking hands makes you feel uncomfortable, well, first of all, if you're a person who just simply does not want to shake hands because you feel very uncomfortable with that, then you should practice a response that says, somehow deflects the handshake and says, no thank you, but it's nice to meet you, something like that. Anyway, so practice that. If you're a person who doesn't do handshakes, you've probably thought about this already. If you are a person who is okay with handshaking, but the idea just makes you feel weird and you're like, I'm not sure if I'm doing it right, you should probably ask. Find someone you trust, your brother, your dad, your friend from college, someone you know who does have a good handshake and who you like, and get them to shake your hand and ask them to tell you how it feels. Your grip should be, pretty solid but not too tight, and it should be sort of a confident, you're projecting confidence when they meet you. So you're going to do that when you meet your company partners. Do it tomorrow at the job fair. Do it when you go for site visits. But if you feel like you need feedback, go find someone you trust and ask them for it. The next things are make eye contact. Pretty straightforward, but don't forget to do it because you're nervous. Also, lean forward, sit up straight. Many of you are doing this while I'm talking. Some of you are leaning while I say things. I know I've said something that felt a little like didn't hit right, or that you were concerned or you're confused because of the look you have on your face or the way you lean forward towards me a little bit. Interviews are conversations with human beings. You are not a robot. So don't go into your interview trying to feel robotic and being like so in your head that you forget to just be a person with your body language. Nod, say yes, smile, laugh when something funny happens. It's okay. One example I like to use, actually, you've all done selection day. You've all seen us in the morning when the judges do like the stone face. We don't smile, we don't nod, right? You all had this, right? Like you were being interviewed by robots, right? It's really, really hard. It's so hard how hard is it to do that? So hard to do that. So that's not what you want to be in your interview. So just remember to just, relax and be natural. Thank your interviewers for their time. Their time is a gift to you. Yes, they have a need, they want to hire someone, but the time that they spend with you, the interest they take in you and in your candidacy, the time that they talk to you, maybe even the time they take to give feedback to you is a gift. So don't forget to say thank you. And then finally, remember that the evaluation does not begin or end with the interview itself. When you walk in the door, when you go to a company partner and you walk in, if they have a lobby, many of them won't, but when you walk into that first place and you say hello to the first person, you are being interviewed. When you are walking around the job fair venue tomorrow, you are being watched. I don't say this to make you nervous, but I say this to make you understand that the entire thing is an audition. Company partners who are getting to know you are trying to decide, do I want to spend every day with this person? Do I want to take this person to a client dinner with me? Do I want to do business travel with this person? Charlie and I travel all the time, right? I don't want someone on the VFA team I don't want to travel with because I'm going to see them a lot. We do a lot of sharing hotel rooms, right? So just remember that it's all about the behavior and the professionalism that you exhibit from the beginning and the end. Remember this at the happy hour after the job fair tomorrow. You're going to be ready to relax, and you can relax a little, but think about how quickly you down that drink, or think about all of those things that you are feeling more relaxed, but also company partners will be there and they are watching. So, questions about any of those things? All right, so we're going to dive into the 3 questions that I coach fellows on the most and see fellows stumble over pretty often. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what these are, and then you're going to get an opportunity to practice. So I think this one is kind of notoriously difficult for job interviewers around the world, not just VFA fellows. The notorious, tell me about yourself. And you think, oh God, I don't even know what to say about that. Should I do they want to know where I'm from? Do they want to know where I went to college? Where do I start? There are other variations of this question that often all mean the same thing. So it can be, what drew you to this opportunity? What made you want to work here? What they're actually asking of you is not necessarily the answer to the question that they asked, especially an open-ended one like, tell me about yourself. What they're asking for you to do is to pitch yourself and to frame your candidacy for them as a job seeker. So there are some ways to do this well, and there are some ways to do this poorly. So how many of you have ever felt the urge to start, I started college when I was a freshman and I did this club thing and then I did that club thing and I started at this major, but I decided I didn't like it, so I tried this other major because I had this professor and the class was so good. And you're telling the story and what does it mean? What is the point? Resist the urge to do that. That's exactly what you don't want to do. Also, you don't want to go on too long. You don't want to be talking to someone and have them lose the thread. They can't figure out how they ended up where they are with your pets after they were talking about where you started for college and then you transferred, right? They don't want to have to follow that story around. And also, the main thing is don't leave your interviewer searching for the point. So, what should you do instead? First one would be begin with your unique connection to this opportunity or to this company. There's a reason you pitched them. There's a reason you put them on your preference sheet. Or there's a reason I put them on your preference sheet and now you're reading it and trying to figure out what are you going to do at this company? Yes, I know that's what you're doing. I know that's how you spent your plane ride. You're trying to figure out why did I put you together. Could be because they wanted you, because they saw something from you that they thought was really interesting. There's something about it when you're reading those opportunities that's going to connect. There's going to be something in your personal story, something in your academic interests, something about a thing you care about, whatever that thing is. Maybe you looked up the founder and you saw a talk that the founder gave, maybe in a venue like this, and it turns out that the founder shares values that you care about, and you can connect to those values, and you're like, yeah, I want to work there. It's okay. This is where you bring this out. This is where you say, this is why I'm interested in your company. Do it succinctly, but those are the kinds of things you're looking for. Then you want to highlight the most important points in your resume that make you qualified to work there. Do not just narrate your resume top to bottom. They've got it. They can read it. That's not what they need. What they need from you is for you to pull out the important things that matter to them and are relevant to them and let you frame your story in the way that makes you a compelling candidate for them. I think sometimes for an unpracticed interviewer, or again, if you're nervous, or if you're trying to figure out how you're going to connect to this opportunity, there's this urge to just kind of take your story and the things on your resume and just kind of dump it out on the table. Here's all the things I've done. And you're going to wait for the interviewer to pick that one thing that they connect to, and they're going to pull it out, and you're going to go, oh, that's the thing you care about. Let me tell you more about that. That's not what you want to do. What happens when you do that? Who's in control of the interview when you do that? They are. Who needs to be in control of the interview? You do. You need to be in control of the interview. You control the interview by framing your candidacy. If you were listening to the Match webinar last night, you've heard me use this analogy already, but all of you right now should be really, really, really good at writing a thesis statement. You need to have a thesis statement about your candidacy for this job. So your pitch, why you want to do this job, is a thesis statement about who you are, why you connected, what your relevant skills are, what you're going to bring to that company. Does that make sense? It's hard. It's harder than it sounds, which is why we're going to practice. So I want you to pair up We're going to take like 3 minutes apiece, so 6 minutes total. I want you to think of a job on Match that you're interested in, maybe something you pitched, maybe something you're interviewing tomorrow. Tell your interview practice buddy what kind of job you're pitching. You're pitching a biz dev job at, I don't know, Group Maddox. I don't know if they're hiring for biz dev off the top of my head, but that's what you're doing. Tell them what you're pitching, and then practice telling them why you connected to that company or why you want to work there. It really, really helps to have tried to do this once before out loud before you do it for real tomorrow. So we're going to do it for 3 minutes, give each other feedback, then we're going to switch. The original one doing the feedback is going to practice themselves, and then you're going to give them feedback. This is like your elevator pitch, if you've heard of that. It shouldn't take you much more than a couple of minutes. So roughly 2 minutes to say it, a minute for feedback, and then we're going to switch. Everybody got it? So the question you're answering is, tell me about yourself, or why do you want to work here? And you're using some real Match job that you are actually interested in. Questions? Okay, go.
Yep, great. Listen in. I can tell you're pitching out your all club tomorrow, aren't you? Yeah. Okay. No, you're doing great. No, you're terribly strong because I can already tell that you have an alignment to what they're trying to do, right? So already I'm like clued in to be like, oh, she's not just about like wanting to actually like, make money. She actually is about like promoting something that we're actually doing at a bigger level. It's a great start. Keep going. This is what you got to rehearse for tomorrow. What's the role for tomorrow? Account management. Okay. It takes a lot of organization. It takes a lot of like customer-facing things, right? So what they're going to be looking for is they're going to be looking for evidence that you have been organized in the past, to be able to manage those things before. And the best way to you get a great start of like I am like aligned with Natural All Club's mission and what we're trying to do. I'm aligned. And now in this role as an account manager, when I look at the specifics and know kind of what they're looking for, if they're looking like I'm speaking out organization, be like, yeah, you know, in terms of organization, I was the coordinator of XYZ club on campus, and we had a budget this amount of money, and I was able to like make sure all these people.
Switch. We're at 3 minutes. If you're pitching, you should be listening now.
It's going to help them be able to see why those skills would apply to, and kind of you like this stuff. You love having customer like service-oriented things, etc. So yeah, keep going. That's good. So I don't mean to make you nervous, but you're doing good. If I make you nervous, I won't go in. so sorry. I don't
No,
mean
it's
to-
okay.
But it's also good because I'm not hiring you for tomorrow, but someone else might be.
I know,
So
but
it's
it's
good.
in
It's
the
good to
middle.
feel it, you know? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I worked with them to help create the events that led to the empowerment of the leadership opportunities for and I've also been an RA at Emory for a few years for youth freshmen. So some of the most rewarding work that I've done with them is just being able to stand up and voice for
What's the role you're pitching tomorrow?
Michigan
Oh, okay, great. That's great then, because like I got two instances. I totally got the empowerment and first example, and then the RA, etc. I was wondering. I was like, it sounded like it would be kind of role. So I think it's actually really, really good. I think to a degree to which you can say, like the right now you're kind of just saying things in broad language, right? I think what would be really helpful is if you can point to some specifics. Yeah. And say like, not only have I had an impact on these things here because XYZ survey results, or as an RA I was like somewhere, I don't know, whatever it might be, but I also get inspired by that, and I'm passionate about doing these things, which is why I'm here, like at the Women's Empowerment Organization, because I have the experience and I have the success doing things and the passion for the things that you do here, blah 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 blah. And I'm looking at, and I want to leverage my skills and my experiences to further your mission. Sorry, I didn't mean to like interrupt your feedback, you know? I'm Charlie, by the way. What's your name? Karen. Hi, Charlie. Lucy. Hi. Good to see all of you.
Thanks.
Yeah. Did you already go? No, I mean, I don't even know again. You don't need to, but cool.
I think
Hey, what now?
I just got here,
Oh,
so where did I
wonderful.
start?
Yeah. See if you can find a table where there's 5 people and join there, because we're going to do a lot of pairs. And so we got someone to pair off with next time to talk. And by the way, what was your name again? I'm so sorry. Jente. Oh, yeah. Great. Good to see you again.
Yeah.
So find a table of 5 people and probably there.
Yeah.
Pull up a chair to it for next time, okay?
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Cool.
Up. Let's bring it back. Let's bring it back. Clap once if you can hear me. Twice if you can hear me. All right. That always feels a little cheesy, but it works every single time. I don't know why, but it always works. What was hard about that? Give me like 2 volunteers who will tell me what it was about that you struggled with or that you found challenging. Sure. Tell me your name.
I'm Kevin.
Hi, Kevin. Now tell me.
So I was listening to Josh, and he's applying for a financial analyst role, and I know nothing about that, and so it was hard to like give him feedback because I'm like, yeah, it sounds great. I'd hire you like tomorrow.
But what do I know about being a financial analyst?
Like my background's in biology and biophysics. What do I know about financial stuff? So, that was really hard. But,
I can see that. What about if you were actually giving the pitch? What's hard about pitching yourself in this context? Yeah. Tell me your name. Haley.
The on-the-spot aspect of it, and also trying to stay concise within your words.
Yeah. That is the whole reason for practice. Who hit on something that felt good, that felt like, oh yeah, this works, I should remember this for tomorrow? Yes, name.
I'm Larissa.
Hi, Larissa.
Megan.
Hi, Megan.
She did a really good job of saying that she cared about people, and that was her primary motivator, and I was very impressed.
Good job. What else? Who else did something that felt like, yeah, let me write that down before I forget? Practice, 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 practice. Yes.
Dan did a really good job of connecting his experiences to what he wants to do,
Mhm.
and
Thank you. And that is Jan, and your name is? Stephanie. Yeah.
Devin.
Devin, I'm sorry, I can't hear. Dan and Devin. Okay, perfect. Names are not my thing, which is why I'm going to make you all repeat yours over and over again. So that is, my computer has gone to sleep. Let me wake it back up, and then we will. While we wait for my computer to wake back up, I will just say that like the best thing you can do about this particular interview skill is just keep practicing. Practice by yourself, practice with a friend, practice writing it down if you need to. The more times you do it, the more fluid it's going to become. Here we go. So the second question that I want everyone to practice is, tell me more about the experience on your resume. It'll usually be something specific. Tell me more about that project manager job. Tell me more about the internship you did last summer. What are they asking when they say, tell me more? What they want to know is, or they might say, what did you do at that job? Or what did you learn there? But what they really want to know is two things. One is that the best predictor of future performance is past performance. So they want to know if you did anything at all and how well did you perform. And the second thing they want to know is, can you communicate complex information out of its context in a way that is understandable and engaging? In other words, can you communicate across their teams? Can you communicate with their customers? What they want to know is, can you take this thing that was probably very inside baseball at some job you worked in where you were solving a process or you were fixing a problem with a client, like there was something you did that doesn't make a lot of sense out of context. Can you make sense of it for people? Because that's what they're going to want you to do for their clients, or when you work with another team, when you're a project manager. This is really important. So these are the two things that they're evaluating with that question: your impact, your communication skills. So what you don't want to do is ramble through a long chronological story with way too much detail in the background. You can frame your answer by saying, first let me give you the backstory a little bit, or let me set the scene for you. And you might say, we were a B2B, well, let's use an example from like the selection day. Let's like pretend you're the company that's the virus, right? Like we were a customer success team and we had malware that affected some of our clients, and we as a customer success team came up with a communication strategy that, you know, secured us new clients and helped us close a deal with an investor, right? You all did that exercise. Like pretend you were that team. That might be what you say. So that's what they're looking for from you, is the little bit of background for context. What did you do? And then what was the impact? Did you help clients solve their problems? Did you help your company get new investment? Something like that. That's the kind of thing they're looking for. Don't provide more detail than is necessary, and don't leave your interviewer wondering what the point is or what it was you actually did. You are the main character in this story. You probably worked in a team, but your main character is not your manager. Your main character is you and what you did, therefore showing what you can do for the company that you're interviewing with. So the do's are mostly the opposite of the don'ts, which is being succinct and describing the key objectives and maybe the key challenges of what you were doing in a way that is understandable outside of the context of that original company. Providing evidence of your impact. You solved the problem, you secured clients, you retained clients, you raised money, something like that. And then bring it back to the role you're seeking. It is your job to make it relevant. It is not your interviewer's job to figure out, oh, well, that sounds a lot like this thing we could do in my company. You need to always come back to the job description and make it relevant for them. So that's how you need to wrap up every story. That's the just so. The just so is, I did this in this other place, I can do this for you. That make sense? Charlie, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah. I've done a lot of these interview questions, and the thing that we hear the most is we hear this, there's a fine line between providing too much detail and not enough detail. You don't just want to say, oh yeah, there was a challenge, but we came together and we solved it. Like, great. Like, but give us a couple of steps of how you did it concretely. That's always helpful. And again, the degree to which you can have quantifiable results or impacts, that's really helpful. Yeah. Like, if you can say, if you can say, yes, actually, we revamped our Instagram practices, and we actually saw a lot of increases in people who are following us. As an interviewer, you're kind of like, is that 14 people? Like, what do they mean? But if you say, yeah, we actually like revised our Instagram strategy, and we did like we followed a couple of influencers, got them to follow us back, and through a couple of other best practices, we were able to increase our Instagram traffic by 470%. Something like that. You're like, whoa, that's a lot more impressive. So tie it to the results if you can. If you are unsure of what your results might have been in certain cases, do your best in advance to try to figure that out. And that might sound unhelpful right now, but to the degree which you can approximate your impact in areas, it's really helpful.
Yeah. I would also add, and Charlie, what you said kind of jogged my memory about this. Many of the job descriptions you're looking at say like something they want from you. They want you to be proficient at Excel or Tableau or be an experienced person at driving social media views, something. There's some sort of skills or proficiencies that it says you should use or that you should have that you bring to this job. And so when you're also talking about the measurable impact, talk about the tools you used or the skills you implemented. I used Tableau to do this because you know also that they're really looking for someone who knows how to use Tableau. Or I created an Excel model that let us do Y that solved our problem, and lo and behold, they're looking for someone who's really proficient at Excel, right? Use your story to not only show your impact, but to show how you applied your skills to produce that impact. Oops. So now we're going to practice again. We're going to do 5 minutes this time. Switch up, maybe do different pairs. If you want to think of a different job opening, that's fine. If you want to stick with the one you've got because it's like your top job and you really want to be practicing for it, that's okay too. But think about how you're going to take one experience on your resume or one experience from your past and pitch it to that job. That's like, why was this experience something that is relevant to this job that you're now seeking that will help you make the case for why you would be a solid candidate for that job? So pretend they've asked you about whatever experience you've decided to use, and then take that experience and pitch it to your partner. We'll do 2.5 minutes, and then switch to the other 2. Sound good? All right, go.
Let's do this. Let's knock this out. I'll come over there.
Let's do it.
Want to go first?
I'm thinking about which one. I'm thinking about which one I want to.
Here's your resume? Yeah. Great. What's the job you're looking for?
A business development and project manager.
Great.
This has been the experience I've talked about the most.
Great.
I could have wanted to.
Tell us, but you don't know what they're going to ask you about that. So tell us about your experience with Guitar American Institute.
Yeah, so I was the first ever intern at the Guitar American Institute over the summer, and I helped. They let me. It was very entrepreneurial. I was able to kind of figure out exactly what I wanted to do. So I did a lot of research, especially with the World Cup, since that is where guitar is mostly used. So I did a lot about how America could learn more about guitar and the culture before we emerged into that space. I did a lot of project development as well with different programs that they were hosting. So during like the Holy Month of Ramadan for Muslims, they had an entire dinner series where I helped them continue networking and building relationships with other think tanks in the area so that they would want to come to our events. The last big thing I worked on was their intern manual. Since I was the first one, they didn't really know what the role entailed, so I kind of divided it up by project, and so I did 3 different departments in the space, and I was able to kind of train the new interns when they came in a month after I started.
That was great. We didn't really talk about like a role that you were looking for, except for kind of manage like the applications and the actual related one, and so one thing I think you do better is kind of like definitely more project related to how relate some of these experiences to how you might use them in like whatever specific role. It's kind of hard.
Yeah, I think what's missing, you're very concise, and you have a lot of good energy with how you answer the question. Oh, great. What's missing from that answer is what were your actions in pursuit of? Like you were the first intern. My goals were this and do this and do this. That's awesome. Yeah, like, and here's what I did. I did, network during Ramadan, did all these things in pursuit, and the moral of the story is we were able to increase our partnerships by blah, 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 blah things, which I know in a biz dev role I would need to, I think the pursuit, like, what are you trying to do and how do you, because also they might be looking to, like, hey, if we give you a goal, are you going to make sure that you're actually aligned? Yeah, that's good though.
So I'm looking for product or project management roles. I believe that Fiverr has one. Yeah. And so it's weird because they're not asking me about my resume, so I guess I'm just gonna
Tell us about your summer internship last summer. What were you doing past summer?
So I was working at ProQuest.
Great.
In a product development intern, and I was working on.
I missed the minute and a half mark. Switch to your next person.
Trying to really find a space to solve problems for our clients, which are mostly university researchers or librarians. And so before I got there, they'd come up with kind of a teaching and learning product, data mining. This wasn't, researchers weren't really buying in because it didn't really help them with any problems that they had. People that were teaching that and already had those issues. So
I'm going to pause you right now. You're giving too much backstory.
Okay.
We need to get to the crux of like what you were doing quicker than this.
Okay.
So it's something to practice. You know?
Right.
Practice quickly. I was an intern at ProQuest. This was a challenge they were facing.
Yeah.
And so I was tasked, and so I was working to address this.
Yeah, I was working to address this issue with non-pilot partners, and so I managed a couple of developers to revamp their issues so that they could put own scripts into it and work with their own data along with ProQuest sources, and this appealed a lot more to our university partners. And we expanded the pilot from 4 partners to 20.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we worked through several development sprints with different.
Bring it back. Let's bring it back in, everyone. All right, tell me what was hard about that. What did you stumble over that you didn't expect? Tell me your name. Lydia.
Seeing like a lot of parallels between something you've done and a role, it's hard to pick just like a couple to talk about.
Yeah, and I think one thing to remember about that is that this is not the only chance you're going to get to tell them about it, right? Like this is the opportunity, this is like the teaser or the trailer. This is the thing that gets them to want to ask more and dig more. So give them what they need to be really compelled and want to ask questions, but you don't have to actually get the whole story out in the first answer. Tell me something that went well. What are you writing down? Oh, yeah, Charlie.
Actually, I'm sorry, what's your name again? Austin.
Hi, Austin. You're on the spot.
Yeah.
I was giving too much backstory.
Yeah.
And so after getting that feedback, I was able to succinctly quantify my impact, and I need to work on getting to the point of addressing the issue that I was working on. But
yeah. Great, thank you.
Thank you, Austin, for letting me pick on you for that a little bit. It actually is a common challenge of people giving so much backstory. That's why I asked them to share that. Because remember, you only have so much time that your interviewer is really focused. I mean, it's kind of like they're going to listen to you, but they're most interested in how you're going to lead off with that. So really catch them in that first, opening sentence or two of your response.
Yeah. The good news about this is that your resume is only so long. There are only so many things you've done, right? You've got most of you have one-page resumes. Which means that there's a finite number of experiences that you need to describe. And while you will tweak them to fit your context differently every time, you're going to get good at knowing the story of the thing you did in that internship or the thing you've done in that year since you left college. You're going to get good at telling that story, and then you're going to be able to adapt that story to the question that you've been asked. So with practice, this is going to get a lot easier. This is why politicians have talking points. It's a lot easier to go out there in the world and answer 1 million different questions when you have a set of 10 answers, and you adapt those 10 answers to your 1 million different questions. So that's also going to be a thing you get good at. So lots of practice. As with all things, get good about talking about the experiences that you've had. Be sure you know what the impact is. You can tell the backstory succinctly. And if you can do that, you can answer any version of this tell me what you did at that job question. So the last one I want us to practice is, do you have any questions for us? This is deceptively hard, right? It should be easy to ask questions because, right, you don't have to come up with the answer. That, you know, answering is the hard part. You've just spent all this time thinking about how you're going to answer questions. Asking them should be easy, except that it's your 5th interview with this company and you've been told all the things and you don't know what to ask anymore, or you're exhausted because it's your 7th interview tomorrow and you have no idea because your capacity to think of questions off the top of your head went out the window sometime around the time you digested your salad. You've just got nothing left. So it's good to know what, in fact, is being evaluated when they ask you if you have questions. It's also good to have a strategy for how you come up with your questions. What do they want to know? They want to know if you've been paying attention, and they want to know if you're engaged. Questions are part of a conversation, and interviews are conversations. They want to know that you were listening to what they said, that you've comprehended what their challenges are and what they're trying to do and what the scope of the role is, and that you were able to then bring your own critical thinking to that, to think about what are the next steps or what might I encounter. And they want to see sustained engagement and enthusiasm. Like if you're meeting a new friend, or like you guys are talking to each other, many of you for the first time, and you have that like, oh, where'd you fly in from? Oh, I just got in from Detroit, and okay, well, I got here from Pittsburgh, and then you're done and you don't have anything else to say, right? That's not somebody you're looking forward to hanging out with at training camp, right? It needs to be someone you're looking forward to hanging out with in your job. So interview is basically the same because interviewers are people. So how to frame your answer. The answer is never, no, I don't have any questions, unless it's like truly been a long conversation and you've asked your 2 questions and they're like, any more? And you're like, well, actually, no, now is an appropriate time to say, thanks very much, and we can wrap it up. Also, have been paying enough attention that the questions you ask your interviewer, don't ask them to repeat information they've already given you. This goes back to they want to know if you've been paying attention. So I do give some examples under the do column, but the giant caveat is only do if they don't violate the principle of not asking them to retell you things they've already told you, perhaps in great detail. But what are the kinds of things you want to do? So the very best questions engage with what you've heard. So they've given you a little bit of information about a project you'd be working on, or a goal that they have, or a market they're trying to move into, and you want to know more about that. So ask those questions. Those are the best questions. You can't prepare those ahead of time. Those questions come from truly active listening, true engagement, and interest and enthusiasm about the opportunity. But also, sometimes you've asked those questions already. Sometimes you're exhausted. Sometimes you're stressed and you blank. And so that's why it's good to have the strategy for the other things. So one thing you can do is ask how the company is going to define success as a role. True story, I am convinced that I got a second interview at VFA because I asked my would-be supervisor that question. What would success look like in this role? How are you going to evaluate it? I'm certain that's why I got a second interview. So it's a really good question. If it hasn't been covered in the things that you've talked about in the interview already, you should use it. Like you're having someone come in to be your first customer success associate. What does success in that look like? Or you're building out your team. What does success in that look like? Another thing is like what kinds of projects or priorities or challenges might you expect to tackle on day one? You're coming to work, you're ready to go, what do they need from you? It shows that you're up for the challenge. It also shows that you're thinking ahead and perhaps There might be skills that you need to skill up on. Maybe they tell you that you'd be working on this thing that's going to require some pretty advanced Excel skills, and you know you're at like intermediate Excel skills. Well, maybe that's something you want to go be brushing up on. And in your second interview, you might even say, I've been taking this online Excel course, and showing that you are continuing to tool yourself for the challenge that may be ahead when you take this job. Also, you might ask how you'll work with the interviewer, because sometimes the interviewer is kind of your immediate supervisor and you know that, but oftentimes, especially in a late interview or a site visit, you're going to be interviewed by other people on the team who are stakeholders to the project you're working on. They're important members of the company. They need to have buy-in on the decision to hire you, but they're not your supervisor. But you're going to work with them in some way. Asking them about themselves and what they do and how you would work with them can show great interest in wanting to be a team player. Also, ask what they enjoy about the company or the city. There's the understanding that as VFA fellows that you are almost certainly moving to their city from somewhere else. They may even assume that you have some trepidation about their city. They may be wondering if you really are interested in moving to Cleveland or Detroit or Cincinnati. By showing interest in their city and what their experience has been and what they like, when they're deciding between two candidates, and one of them has given, I'm not trying to move to Cincinnati vibes, and one of them has given, I'm interested in Cincinnati vibes, they're going to make their bet on the person who's actually interested in moving to where they are. Does that make sense? Okay, Charlie.
Can I add 2 more thoughts for that as
Go
well?
for it.
Sometimes one of my favorite questions when I am exhausted at the end of the interview is I just ask something along the lines of, what's the biggest challenge that you're excited for the role to take on? Because it sort of shows the person that you are excited by a challenge, and kind of shows that you're interested in the role itself too. And sometimes if you know. This is usually not necessarily a first round interview, but if you're interviewing with the hiring manager, someone who would be your manager, it's also sometimes in advance they'll send you their name. They might even send you their LinkedIn profile. That's becoming more and more and more common. Read it, and you also might want to ask questions about them as a person too. My manager in my final interview, I asked a lot of questions about the role that are up here, but then I was dying to know, and I asked him, he actually wasn't home alone, and I asked him, what was this like? What's your story? To also understand, how the person, because as Elizabeth mentioned earlier, it's a human conversation, and part of it too is understanding how you and the hiring manager in particular would work together with people too.
Yeah, definitely. I would just second all of that. So this feels a little weird to practice in this kind of context, and I also do want to be sure we get onto a few things. So we're not going to do the pair-off practice for asking questions, especially since your interviewer in this context is in no position to answer them. But think them through. Maybe write down some ones, make a list, just like having something to go to in your head for that moment when you blank is a good thing. If you prepare for this, you can do it. Yes? Yes, and I would say that that's especially the case if your questions are well tailored. So say your question is about, I don't know, you read an article about a market they're trying to move into, and the CEO said something about it you found compelling, you're like, I want to be sure I get it right. Questions that are written down in advance should be very well prepared, impressive questions. The tell me what you like about Cleveland is not a question you should need to have written down, but also you're probably going to be taking notes or maybe jotting things down in your interview. It's okay to do that. Just remember that when you're writing, you are doing this and you are not doing this. And this is where you make the connection in an interview. So keep the writing and the checking your notes to a minimum, but if you need that and that makes you feel better prepared, then that in the end will help you project that confidence that otherwise might have been harder to project. All right, well, One other thing just to talk about real quick is other types of questions you might ask throughout your interview process and when it is and is not appropriate to ask some of them. So before you're getting an offer, in these early stage conversations and as you're moving through phone calls or Skype interviews or into your site visits, you might be asking, questions about the company. You're learning about what they do and what their goals are and what their challenges are and where they're trying to be in the next 2 years. You're learning about the composition of the team and you're getting background on their industry. You're learning about the responsibilities of the roles and you'll be asking questions about that. You'll ask about the different goals and positions that are in that team. And you'll be learning about the manager and how does the manager like to manage people and who will be your supervisor and all of those things that are questions about the job and the company in terms of how it impacts your day-to-day, what you go to work and do and what they need from you and the problem you're trying to solve. Those are appropriate questions as you're moving your way up towards trying to get an offer. Yes?
Yeah, one more thing I'll add to that, and this kind of goes to the do's and don'ts slide, and apologies for thinking of it after this slide. Avoid questions that might put the interviewer on the spot as well. Questions to avoid are, did I get in? Or did I get it? You would be surprised at the people who will ask at the end of an interview, did I get in? And, and for me, when I our sort of trick when we interview candidates for fellowship is we say, we'll take it to the committee. We're not sure, and we are the committee, but but like we don't. But that's a it's sort of is an on the spot question that like we wouldn't share in that context. So just kind of feel it out, but avoid asking questions that might make the interviewer feel a little uncomfortable or feel like they're not ready to share information at that moment.
I agree, totally. Questions that you are appropriate to start inquiring to after you have the offer but not before include salary, benefits, other kinds of compensation. Those things will be outlined in your offer and then you will have the opportunity to ask questions and talk about them. Many of you are going to have questions about negotiations. Because of the constraints of the time we have today, this is not the space where we're going to talk about how to negotiate an offer. We are going to offer separate programming about this in early May, probably as a webinar. That is coming. It is its own topic that you're going to have a million questions about, and we should treat it appropriately. So we're not doing those here. If you have an offer in your hand, first of all, tell me because I'm going to be excited for you. And second of all, we'll talk about how to do that, but I don't think anyone in this room has an offer in hand. So we will talk through negotiations at a later time. But you're going to get an offer that says all the things, and that is the appropriate time to ask about them. Yes?
This isn't due to negotiation, but should we consider an official offer a piece of paper, or should we consider an offer like a verbal offer?
Many of you are going to get verbal offers before you get paper offers. You're going to have a conversation with the hiring manager who's going to call and say they're so excited to bring you on. You may be really excited right then, and you should say, great, I look forward to seeing that offer. And they're going to send you all of the information in writing. You should not feel pressure to verbally accept at the time that you are offered the job over the phone. Maybe if they give you enough information and you feel like unambiguously there's no way you're not taking that job, then go for it. But in general, you should wait and see the piece of paper. And the piece of paper will be often a formal thing on company letterhead, and it'll say all the legalese that goes along with the job offer too. Sometimes, especially in a very early stage startup where they're just like figuring things out as they go, it might just be an email that spells it all out. Either way, you should see it in writing, and ultimately you must have it in writing to send to me, because until I have your offer in writing, you are not a fellow with a job. You are a fellow who's still seeking a job, so I need your offer in writing. You're going to learn more about that in a few minutes. Yes?
What about like financial questions, like what's your burn rate, or what's your runway?
Yeah.
Things like that. Is that appropriate, or is that a no-go zone?
It's not a no-go zone exactly, but I think you're going to get the feeling of so first of all, you should be doing your own research about how much investment there has been.
Elizabeth, can you rephrase the question?
Yeah, so burn rate would be how fast is a company going through cash. So especially if you're a VC-backed startup, maybe you raised $500,000. you expect that $500,000 to last you a certain period of time before you either need to be revenue positive or you need to raise more money again. So the burn rate is how quickly are you spending that money, and at what point in the future do you project to run out? Another way of thinking about this is the runway that a company has. How much money does it have to spend? How much time does it have in the bank to make their product work, fix the bugs, find customers, launch it, get out there and get people to buy it so that they are then earning revenue and not living off of investments or, you know, that kind of thing. So those are all questions that are appropriate to want to understand in a startup context, because that's how many of your startups are running. They may tell you they're bootstrapped, and if that's the case, then it is just about revenue. But companies who are receiving venture capital, often that venture capital investment is public. And so you can go online. There's a website called Crunchbase, where with a free account, you can usually see how much has been invested in a company, and you'll know what's there. You could ask a company what their runway is. I would not ask them their burn rate, actually. What I would say is, what's your runway? And they'll tell you 9 months, right? And then you can probably find out on the internet how much has been invested in them, and you'll know roughly what the burn rate is. But the thing that's actually relevant to you is, what is the runway? Because the runway is how long do they see themselves staying in business. But here's the thing to remember about startups. Even startups that are doing really well may at any given time not have much more than 6 to 9 months of runway anyway. But they're continuously getting investment from other places. They're earning revenue. They're always working deals. Like, most people's households don't run on 6 months of runway, to be perfectly honest. So like 6 months is not necessarily a scary number. That does not mean your fellowship job is going to evaporate from you in 6 months. It means your boss is busy raising money. That's what that means. Yes.
I've been asked twice pre-offer about my salary and benefit expectations.
Yeah.
So how would you like us to answer those sorts of questions?
Yeah, it's a hard question. I think...
Because you're right,
yeah.
You don't want to talk salary until you've been offered, but then I wasn't sure how to respond pre-offer.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it's especially a really early conversation, maybe if you're at a site visit, it feels a little more appropriate than if it's your first interview or even just like a second phone interview. That question, the answer to that may be something like, I'm interested. Yeah, you could do that. But the answer to that question could be, I am interested in learning more about your opportunity right now and would be happy to talk about this, you know, if I see you in person for a site visit or something like that. I think kind of deferring that question a little bit, especially for a very early interview, can be okay. Also, we're going to talk a little bit more, assuming we don't run out of time, we've got like 20 minutes left, about the requirements that we ask of company partners. So you all know that a company partner is not supposed to be paying you less than $38,000, and they have to offer you health insurance benefits. So those are blanket expectations for any VFA company, but also they understand that they may need to pay you more in order to be competitive with other offers you may have, to be in line with the skill sets you have, to be in line with the cost of living in their city. So they do know that the number may be more. But my feeling is not to let yourself get too pigeonholed into that. But Charlie, I feel like you have...
Yeah, so there's a couple of things you can do. I think there's 3 things maybe you can do. One is go on Glassdoor. They're not always perfect answers, but
especially
sometimes...
not for startups.
Yeah, sometimes though you can get an idea of how much a certain role might make in a general area, though, which could be helpful. A second thing is the cost of living and the cost of labor varies dramatically in our various cities. So you can do a couple of different like cost of labor, cost of living adjustments. You would not expect to have the same level of salary for a role in like New York as you would in Kansas City.
Correct.
And so just understanding that. And the third thing is you can, if you have like recent friends who graduated or in similar fields in certain areas, you can ask like, hey, what would be like reasonable to expect in this kind of area? And they might be able to give you ballparks of ranges. And if you ask enough people, you can kind of get an idea of like, oh, they're saying 42, they're saying 50, they're saying 45, maybe it's around 45. You can sort of gather that a little bit for yourselves.
Yeah, but I do want to be really emphatic about Glassdoor. Glassdoor is typically corporate jobs. Glassdoor is typically not startup jobs, and so if you're, especially because startups will have titles that are sometimes a little inflated.
Sorry.
Just a little. So like if you're hired at a startup that's got 10 people as, director of business development, and you go Google that or like look in Glassdoor for director of business development in Cleveland, you're going to see salaries that are a lot higher than any startup's going to pay you, I promise. So just like remember to be very context dependent about all of that you do. So it is a hard question. There is no perfect answer, but having some idea of what you expect, but also if it is appropriate in that conversation to kind of defer it until a later stage, I would encourage you to do so. Also, don't ask about the internal review processes, like how often am I going to get evaluated and when am I available, when can I expect to be able to get a raise, or what time do people come to work and how many hours do you expect people to put in until you have the offer. If you're asking those questions before the offer, those questions can be interpreted as, sounds like they want to leave at 5 o'clock every single day, and that's not startup life. Sometimes startup life is getting out at a regular time, but sometimes you're in a sprint or there's some kind of crunch and you need to be flexible, and so you just don't want to ask questions that might indicate that you are inflexible about those sorts of things. Once you have the offer, then it's about understanding what you've been offered and what the norms and expectations are in that company. So I do want to move on to, speaking of norms and expectations, a few other things about Match, because in 10 minutes we're going to have Cleveland Fellows coming in to talk with us. So we're going to get through these pretty quickly. What do you do in Match? Like, what are the behaviors that we are asking of you in order for us to be able to help you the way I spoke about in the beginning? You need to get back to company partners who have pitched you or who have said, we want to interview you, or have said, we want to give you a site visit, can you come out? Like, all of those communications that you get from company partners, you need to commit to answer within 24 hours. We on the VFA team, the expectation that we live with, those of us who are external facing, Amy Nelson is out there in the hallway and she expects me to respond to emails within 24 hours. This is what VFA expects. And we actually have a lot of respect out there in the world because people know that if they reach out to us, we're going to respond. We ask the same thing of you. And if we hear any recurring frustration from company partners, it's that they've emailed you and it's been 3 days and they don't know if you still want their job or not. So commit to 24-hour communication. Also respond to everyone, every time, even if that is no thank you. Even if you've decided that you are ending a conversation, never, 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 never ghost a company, ever. There's no reason. Never ghost them. Always, if you're going to end a conversation, let them know that that's what you're doing. The other thing you need to do is update the status of your conversations on VFA Match. You should have seen something that looks like this already. When you're in your dashboard in VFA Match, you can see the conversations that you're engaged in. So this one is in, I think this is probably under, I think I connected to them, so like connections. But then there'll be the list of all the companies that you connected to, and beside the company is that button that right there says connected, but it'll have the name of whatever status you're in with them. Met at job fair, phone interview scheduled, on-site scheduled, received offer. If you click on that button, it's going to open this dialog box where you're going to change to the status of whatever you're doing now. You met at the job fair and then they invited you for a phone interview. So you've gone from met at job fair to phone interview scheduled. What happens to this data? This data comes to me. I watch it every day. Every day I watch this data. And what I'm doing is looking for trends of the class. How is the class doing? How many people have jobs? Do I need to be out there trying to, get more opportunities on Match because I've got more fellows than opportunities and the ratio is off? Or I'm also looking around and saying, this fellow their pitches are not converting to phone interviews. Their phone interviews are not converting to on-sites. Their on-sites are not converting to offers. I'm going to be watching how that happens. And if I see that you might be struggling, you're going to hear from me, or you're going to hear from someone else on the VFA team saying, your pitches aren't converting. Let's talk about what's going on. We may want to read one, something like that. Yes?
So when it says, how do you feel about this
Mm-hmm.
what's a useful thing to say for you? Because like I'm
Yes.
always like, unsure. Like, is this helping you? Like, is that helping you? Like, what?
Well, so here's the thing. If you're mostly writing, I don't know, but then you write about one, I really like this opportunity, I'm going to know which ones you're caring about, like which ones are interesting to you. Or you might put, had a great phone call, was told to expect to hear back in a week. You know, those kinds of things that help me understand what your timeline is. Or sometimes it'll be, you know, had an on-site, went really well, got a verbal offer, but maybe you're not moving to offer accepted until you get a piece of paper. It's good for me to know you have a verbal offer. So like those kinds of how it went, you're feeling positively, or you're like, God, I don't want this job after all, like that's good to know too. Or to tell me what your expectations about the next step is.
So even granular things like was offered to do trial data analysis or something like that?
Or you could just say was asked to do a work product,
Yeah.
like something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. Question. Did you have a question? Yeah.
So if you like have an offer for a connection, like a company wants to connect with you, but you're not necessarily interested in that job, what do you do? Do you like accept it and say no thank you? Or do you just hit like close? Or do you suggest that we just go through at least the first interview?
Yeah. So what I suggest you do is first of all be really sure you want to say no. Do you actually know enough? It's possible you don't. Also consider that perhaps it's a role you're interested in general, that might help you build the kinds of skills you want to build, but it's not an industry that you've ever imagined yourself in, and like you're not excited about, I don't know, life insurance. Maybe that's not a thing that excites you, but it's a role that could really be building skills that could be valuable to you. People, especially people at your stage of a career, jump industries all the time, and it's the skills that take you from one place to the next and not necessarily your experience in the industry. So I would encourage you to be really sure you want to say no before you say no. That said, if you're going to say no, reply to the email that came in your inbox. Use that email to say, thank you very much for being interested. I'm glad you were, thank you for taking the time to talk to me. Unfortunately, I'm focusing my search on something that's not them, industry that's not them, role that isn't what they offered you, city that isn't where they is. And I want to respect your time so that you're focusing on candidates that are interested in this role. Thank you again. Hope to run into you soon, something like that, right? Just like give them a reason. Lead with gratitude, show you understand their own resource constraints and that you're like doing them the favor to focus their energies elsewhere. But be really, really sure that that's what you want to do, because there is almost no time in your life that people are going to be beating your door down trying to hire you. There's going to be a day where you're going to wish that this was like a thing that you had again, that this was a problem. So just be really sure, because if people are proactively saying, I'd like to talk to you about my job, you should probably find out why. Thank you notes, send them. That's the main thing, yes.
I have a question relating to the other thing. So say you go through multiple phone interviews, can you log them all, or will it only let you log one?
I believe it will only let you log one.
You could type a new note though.
Yes, yes, you can do that. So that'll work.
Do you also want us to put phone interview, because there's no video interview on the drop down?
Phone interview is fine, yeah. Mostly we're making the distinction between a remote conversation and an in-person conversation. So thank you notes, send them. Here's a template. I encourage you, not all of you, to copy paste this template and send the same thank you note to every company. They're going to cotton onto that pretty quickly. But this will give you the elements of what you're looking for. You want to be gracious. You want to thank them for their time. You want to show them some way in which you connected with them, and you want to invite them to next steps. So that's the key of what you're looking for in a thank you note. But thank you notes are so important. It's almost impossible to get hired on the VFA team if you don't send a thank you note. Period. So there are many other companies that feel the same, or that are so accustomed to not receiving thank you notes that that alone is going to make you really impressive. Yes?
Does that include phone interviews as well, or just on-sites?
Every interaction, on-sites, phone interviews, job fair. If you've interacted with a company and they've took any time with you to talk to you about their life and their work and what they're doing, to give you feedback, to give you practice, like I said earlier, that's a gift. They've gifted you with their time. Say thank you every time. Common challenges. So, yes.
Sorry, quick question.
Yeah.
Can a thank you note also come in the form of an email if you just don't have a physical address as well?
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
wanna double check.
Absolutely. In fact, I think the expectation is that the vast majority of thank you notes will be digital, but especially if you've done a site visit and it went really well and you got their physical address while you were there, a handwritten thank you note could be really impressive. But I think the main expectation is that you would do it by email. Common challenges, these are just challenges because we're basically out of time that I'm going to name. You all know these are true. You're all beginning to encounter them. Company partners may not be as responsive as we're asking you to be because company partners are doing many, many things. They are balancing competing priorities just like you are. Many startup hiring managers are not actually HR people. They're people who have a full-time job and they're hiring you in the early morning or between other things or when they're supposed to be doing something else. So give people time, understand that they're busy, understand that they have to build buy-in from other people in their company. They will get back to you eventually. If companies are just completely ghosting you, let me know or let the community director in your city where you're interviewing know because we can check in on that company and make sure that they're actually serious about hiring fellows. But just give them space, follow up. 2 or 3 days later, a polite follow-up that's along the lines of just putting this back on top of your inbox, excited to talk to you soon, can be highly effective. I think we can also spend some time outside of this forum talking about how to manage the competing priorities that you have. Everyone's competing priorities are different. You're in college, you have full-time jobs, some of you, you're trying to write a thesis, you're trying to plan the trip of your lifetime this summer. There are many things that you're trying to do. If you have specific challenges you're trying to figure out how to work through, happy to talk to you. But as I've told all of you in many match prep webinars, use a calendar, block your time, commit to match, make the time to do it. It will make your life a lot easier. Yeah, so that is the last slide I have. It is exactly 4:30 and the Cleveland Fellows are hanging out there. So is there any pressing question you have for me before we take like a 3-minute break to bring them in, get them mic'd, and get them ready to go? No? Yes.
So you had mentioned that, with VFA and startup culture, that generally they'll inflate the roles, but I think as like a working professional, having worked for a year and a half, I do know that usually when they have inflated roles is because they know that they are looking for young professionals that are eager and are going to fill into pretty big shoes.
Yes.
So what would you say, because I've been hearing a lot of different amount markers, but what would you say would be an ideal amount marker for somebody who has been a working professional?
It depends in large part on your skill set. If you are a technical person, so VFA salaries vary across the spectrum. The average is in the 38 to 46 range is where most fellows fall. There are salaries that are beyond that. Those are often people who have been working professionals who have real skills and real impact and real sort of experience of having done that in the past. Or they are fellows with very highly in-demand technical skills. Really good data analysts, software developers, some engineers, sometimes sales and biz dev people if they're working on commission. So some of those salaries will be much further out. I don't want to quote anyone an ideal salary without knowing more about who they are and what your experiences have been. So it's a conversation that I'm happy to have one-on-one. But in general, there should be the expectation that if you do have that kind of experience, especially if it's a couple of years, and if it is in a startup that has the capacity to pay, because not every startup does, some of them are still very small and they're not going to be able to pay you a lot, and so they're paying you in experience and mentorship as much as they're paying you in money, you could expect to do more than the fellowship average. But beyond that, I would want to have an individual conversation about what that looks like, and we can also defer a lot of that to the negotiations content that we'll do a little bit later. Okay, let's take a 5-minute break. I'm going to bring in the Cleveland Fellows, then they're going to talk to us about what it's like to be in Cleveland. Thank you.
Hello.
Turn it on and I'll control it from back there.
Oh, okay,
And
perfect.
they're going to bring out some water for you guys, but
Perfect.
it'll probably be a minute.
Okay, that's no problem. I don't think we're in a rush here for now.
Yeah, South Bend is anywhere from happy hour. It's going to be right out there.
Oh, perfect. All right, I really am not going to. I'm not. Hello? Hello? I think she may have turned it off. I just got to get her attention. Hello? Mic check. Mic check. 1 2 1 2. Is it going throughout the room? Okay. I wish I had a. Hello? Hello?
Everybody, we're going to bring it in. Hello, everyone. Let's bring it back in. Say hello to a fine sampling of the Cleveland Fellows.
Hi. All right. Can everyone hear me? Cool. This is cool. Well, first, I just want to say thanks for coming here. My name is Matt Shaver. I'm a 2016 fellow, born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, graduated from Ohio State, the Ohio State University, in 2016, and moved back to Cleveland for Venture for America, was in the class there. And so I'm really happy that you're all here in my hometown now, and hopefully some of you will come here and get jobs here and continue. Oh, this is fancy. Thank you. Thank you.
We should have all events in the City Club.
I know, this is amazing. Thank you. But yeah, I'm just really happy that you're all here today, and we have an awesome group of fellows that I'm pretty much just going to ask questions, and then I'm going to open it up for you to ask some questions as well, as if you have any. But to get started, just for my own sake, how many of you is this your first time in Cleveland, Ohio? Holy shit. Wow, okay. That's awesome. That's awesome. I will say every time there's a Venture for America event here, it rains one of the 2 days. So I think, unfortunately, tomorrow it will probably rain. That's just how it goes. But that's awesome. How about first time in Ohio? Anyone? Wow. Okay, well, welcome. We have a great state with 3 great Venture for America cities. But I'm really excited that you're all here. So without further ado, like I said, I'm Matt Shaver, 2016 fellow. I work for a company called Numa. We make organic sports drinks. They're in the Tetra Pak packages, brightly colored, and they have no added sugar, really healthy, and they're sold at Whole Foods, gyms, yoga studios all across the country. I work as the national sales manager, and my job is to oversee the sales team and to sell them into more gyms and CrossFit studios and places like that. When we go down the line, everyone else can introduce themselves, and then we'll jump on into it.
Sure. I'm Manisha. I'm a 2018 fellow, so I just moved here in August. I moved here from California, so far move. I graduated from Georgetown And right now I work as a user interface and experience designer at Groupmatics, which is a digital sports ticketing platform. So we work with a lot of professional sports teams to kind of help them with their ticket distribution.
Sweet. My name is Adam Stern. I'm a 2018 fellow as well, and actually my older brother, Jeffrey, is a 2016 fellow also in Cleveland. So kind of an unusual coincidence there. But I studied computer science at Hamilton College. I'm originally from New York City. And I work at a company called Unify Project, which is a nonprofit tech company that is basically doing a lot of big data aggregation and knowledge generation, working with Cleveland leadership to try and change the way the economy works here. So it's cool stuff.
Cool. Hey everybody, I'm Akash Shah. I'm a 2016 fellow from Raleigh, North Carolina. Went to school at the University of North Carolina studying computational biology. I work for a startup here downtown called Genome Oncology. We build software that predicts what medication a cancer patient can get based on their personal genetics. And I've been living in Cleveland for about 2.5 years now and planning on sticking around for quite a bit longer. So I'm really excited about this event.
Cool. And I'm Nina Sweeney. I'm a 2018 fellow, originally from outside Chicago and graduated from Middlebury College in Vermont in May. Moved here in August, and I'm working at Tech Elevator, which is a coding boot camp that helps people transform their lives by learning software development and getting hired in technical roles around Cleveland, and the rest of the Midwest.
Awesome, thank you. So yeah, awesome fellows, each with a different story and a great story. I'm about to ask them all what their thoughts on Cleveland were before they actually came to the city. But I just want to preface that by saying, if you haven't, I don't know how long you've been here, if you haven't noticed already, Cleveland is very much a sports town a lot of the times. We have 3 major sports teams, and so when I actually went to my first day of training camp, it was the day that the Cleveland Cavaliers won the NBA championship, which was our first national championship in over 50 years. And so Akash and most of the other Cleveland fellows, the first time they met me, I was bawling my eyes out. Really happy, and the only person who really understood what I was going through was Andrew Yang, and he came up and he was like, Matt, I just want to say congrats, I know how much this means to you. He's like, I'm a Knicks fan, I understand. And now he's running for president, so that's a kind of a cool story and made it almost worth it missing the championship. But enough of my sob story. So yeah, I'm curious to know what each of your thoughts were about Cleveland, because as you've seen, most people in this room have never been here before. So if you could share just what you thought your original impression was when you came here, either to interview or your first time in the city, what some thoughts you had were, and then maybe quickly how that's changed since you've been here and what how you've grown since then.
Yeah. So my whole experience with Cleveland, I think, was pretty interesting because my brother got here 2 years before me. And being from New York City, naturally the first thing that I thought was, why the hell are you going to Cleveland? And really I think genuinely, the only thing I knew about Cleveland at that point was the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was here, and there's those Cleveland tourism parody videos. I don't know if any of you have seen them.
We're famous for those.
I don't know if you haven't seen them.
Yeah.
They're really funny, but it's like I said, I basically, every month I think I would send those videos to my brother and be like, how's it going over there? But But when I ended up getting into the fellowship and eventually landing the job at Cleveland that I wanted, I've done a complete 180. It's one of those things. The way my brother describes it is that most people from outside of Cleveland, kind of just look down on Cleveland. But once you've been there and once you really experience it, a lot of people's perspective changes. And I kind of experienced the same thing. It became a thing. There's a lot of personality in the city, and there's a lot to do in the city. And certainly it's not where I'm from. New York City is just kind of everything thrown at you, but Cleveland has a more distinct characteristic to it. And that's something that I've really enjoyed about it. And there's a lot of other aspects as well, but ultimately my first impressions of the city and what I actually feel about the city now, having lived here for 7 months, completely different. So.
Very well said. I think that was perfectly said, so we'll just leave it at that.
It's all good.
Maybe a more important question to ask then, since none of you were from here originally. Each of you, could you tell us a little bit about what was the hardest thing to adjust to, and especially for the newer fellows, what are you still adjusting to that was difficult compared to either where you came from or where you went to school, where you grew up? Because Cleveland does have its own character, like you said, but it is very different from a lot of other places. So I'd love to hear, what it was difficult to adjust to coming in.
Yeah. You want to start?
Sure. Honestly, I really liked Cleveland. Before I even moved here, the first time I came was for my site visit, and it was awesome because the person who was hiring me actually, for the first half of the day, I had my site visit, and for the second half of the day, we got in his car and he drove me around like the entirety of the Cleveland area. So I got to see like everything. We went to all the stadiums. We went up to Case Western, and he showed me like a bunch. There's this thing called ThinkBox there, which is like this creative makerspace, which is awesome. And then he took me to a bunch of local like spots and restaurants, like drove me around kind of the neighborhoods that he heard fellows live in. And that just made me feel like so welcome, and I feel like that's actually something that hasn't changed. I think that ever since I've moved here, I felt that everyone here is very welcoming and is actually excited to like make you into a Clevelander, which I've really enjoyed. Honestly, a lot of my struggles moving here had to do with just like starting a job. I was just like exhausted like after for my first couple of weeks. I remember I would just like come home and just like do nothing or like go to sleep. So I think the hardest thing was like kind of trying to get into a routine. And it wasn't until like Nina and I joined a climbing gym where I was like, okay, like I have like something to do after work like that we can do consistently together. So yeah, honestly, I think, and I don't think that's unique to Cleveland. I think that's something that I feel like I would have experienced like in any city I would have got to.
Yeah, and I would add to that, I think the hardest part for me would have been hard in any VFA city or any city that I moved to really, which is just like, for me, this is my first job out of college, and that might be true for a lot of you as well. And like moving into the real world is kind of lonely. You're not like surrounded by people your age anymore all the time. And so that was something that was really tough for me in the beginning and really made me happy that I moved to Cleveland because the fellow community here is super tight. And so I always had people like checking in on me and making sure I was settling in. I live with Manisha and one other 2018 fellow, and I would encourage you all, like, once you start looking at housing, to like talk to other fellows and maybe try to live in a group, because that's been a really great way for us to just like get to know people where you don't have to like make appointments all the time. And so I think it was just kind of adjusting to like adult life, but I've had a really great group of people to help me do it. So
I'm gonna go with the elephant in the room and say the cold weather. Being from North Carolina, that was, at least perception-wise, coming in was something that was scary to me. I hadn't even ever driven in the snow, didn't really own a proper winter jacket, so that was definitely one of the things. I would say the other thing that was something that I didn't anticipate until I got here that was definitely a struggle was it's a lot different making friends once you're out of college. Like, you have to actually go and do things outside of work and kind of put yourself in situations or join organizations or be involved in things to kind of meet other people your age, particularly being like a lot of the VFA cities are not necessarily cities that are magnets for like people coming straight out of college, like where like a lot of the young people are moving. So like you have to be a little bit more intentional about, particularly if you want to make friends outside of VFA, which I think is a really important thing that I always tell fellows when they're incoming, like you need to put just as much effort into making friends outside of VFA and not just being inside that bubble. So that was something that I definitely had a little bit of trouble with, and it took a couple of months to kind of figure out what are the things that I like doing outside of work where I could meet other people my age or just other people in general, just make connections in the city.
Yeah, I'll definitely echo Akash there and say, being from here, it's definitely a close-knit city as well as fellow community. And so, one of the big questions if you meet someone new when you're out and about is, where'd you go to high school? And that's something that you'll get asked right from the get-go because it kind of establishes, oh, okay, do you know so-and-so, so-and-so? It's kind of like going to a very small college. And if you're not from here and you didn't go to high school here, that can be a difficult thing to acclimate to. But Akash, you brought up a great point about putting yourself out there, getting involved in different things outside of work. What are some things, I know you mentioned climbing gym, Climb Cleveland, right? Fantastic. But what are some other things that all of you have done outside of work in Cleveland that you've really enjoyed?
all looking
Yeah.
at me. All
You
right.
can start to work
You're
your
just
way
at
across.
the end. I just get to look that
because
direction.
I'm here, I'm like, I don't want to start every time, but now I realize I've just not started at all. But
I can start.
anyways.
It's fine. Yeah, so things I've enjoyed outside of work. One thing that comes to mind is right now I'm going through the process of becoming a volunteer for this organization called Youth Outdoors, which I don't know if you guys have heard of the Metro Parks, but it's really cool. Like Cleveland has all of these beautiful green spaces that like was such a surprise to me. Like I live a 10-minute walk from a beach, which like I had no idea there was a beach in this town, which we're going to on Saturday if anyone wants to join. But I think that like I'm becoming a volunteer for them, so I'm gonna be like giving kids opportunities to like go on outdoor trips, and that's been a really cool way for me to like meet people who have similar interests to me, but who don't even know what VFA is, which is definitely something it's easy to fall back into VFA sometimes. So I'm trying to challenge myself to like get out of the bubble a little bit.
Cool.
So, yeah, I can.
You go ahead.
Okay. So a lot of what I did, especially for the first, I have a lot of like side projects and personal activities I did. So I spent a lot of time honestly not really assimilating to what the city did, and that like started to weigh on me after a while. Like I realized like every day, I'm going to work, coming home, and then that's kind of it. And I realized like after maybe too late, I mean not too late, I have plenty of time left and not even a year through. But but so really just recently I realized like I need to start actually going out. And so one of the biggest things I do is I make music. And a couple months ago I met this girl who does DJing all across Cleveland, and she started introducing me to other musicians, and like slowly but surely I realized there's like this entire underground world of music going on in Cleveland that for months I just didn't even know existed. And so sometimes like I think you really just kind of have to go out there. Like if you have something you like, try and find the other people that like it. Like they're definitely here, and if they've been here for a while, they're going to be able to help you, find that place. And I'm really happy that I'm starting to find it now, because for a while I was like, wow, like I'm just kind of going home all the time. I don't know. So.
Yeah, I would say for me, like one of the things that I've met a lot of younger people at, where our neighborhood has a park. So just playing pickup basketball, met a lot of people through that, just people that come through to play. Intramural leagues, I know a lot of fellows, depending on different sports they're into, have been participating in intramural leagues and have met a lot of people that way. I'm also really into like art and art history, so I've been going to the art museum for lectures. But that's kind of a little bit opposite. I made a lot of friends, like 60 plus, that are there like at 4 p.m. I'll leave work early to go to a lecture or something on like a random topic. But it's, I think it really just like Adam was saying, like whatever your interests are, like Cleveland. I think one of the fellows in our year, Anshu, always says like, it's like a full city, half price. So like everything you could ever imagine is available to you in Cleveland.
That's not why.
At one point. I mean, really, but like at one point, Cleveland was the 5th largest city in America, so it has the infrastructure of like a very large city, and all those things are still here, even if the population dropped, over the last couple of decades, and we're kind of at the bottom of it. Hopefully, there'll be some population growth moving forward, kind of bottomed out, but I think it really demonstrates like, your perception of Cleveland versus like what it actually is. Like whatever your interests may be, like I promise you probably can find like a community of people here that are kind of engaging in whatever that may be.
Yeah, definitely echo the amount of things that you can do and get involved in Cleveland are like endless. There's so much thing to do here. Things that I've really loved is exploring Cleveland's food scene. There are so many different types of cuisines and restaurants and like food trucks like all across the city. And Gabby, which is Nina, and my other roommate, and I are both really passionate about like food justice. So one thing that we do is we've like gone to a bunch of different restaurants like in and around Cleveland, but also VFA, some of the other fellows in VFA set up like a neighborhood visit where we went to different neighborhoods that are not normally regularly frequented, and met a lot of community leaders and partners like through those different cities. And I think what's amazing is that we were introduced to those people, and now Gabby and I are learning about like food and community and culture in ways that like we didn't even think would be possible, like just moving here to the city. And I think that has been really empowering and really awesome for both of us. So.
One of the question prompts here was, is it possible to live in Cleveland and get around without a car? And I think I'm just going to kind of skip to the chase and be like, not really. I mean, you can. There are ways, for sure.
You should probably talk
I would say talk to your experience. It's not as friendly as it could be, is how I'll say. But there's room for improvement. There's probably a more optimistic way to put it.
Yeah, I think I'm the only one here without a car. Is that correct? But I do carpool with Nina to and from work. So Nina works like 10 minutes away from me. So I will say, and there are fellows who do not have cars and like manage. I think that
my brother.
Yeah, like your brother. Well, he's a motorcycle.
He does not use that in practice.
Yeah, and Leave, who's a 2017 fellow. She, even though she has a car, commutes normally using public transportation to work. I know that Akash can talk about like walking to work, like when he was living downtown. But yeah, I would say like I definitely feel limited, like not having a car. There are things that I have to definitely plan ahead. I like grocery shop when Nina grocery shops. Like I go to the gym when Nina goes to the gym. And Nina's very awesome and like lets me use her car all the time. So like that has made it so much more doable. But yeah, so I'd say that if you do decide not to have a car, I think that like living downtown is a good idea because a lot of those things are walkable. The public transportation does exist, and it's not as bad as DC's public transportation. So if you guys are from DC, you just totally know what I mean. Like, it's really bad. So I'll take it. But one thing, also additionally, like I think everyone in the VFA community I've found has been very like respectful and extremely nice when it comes to me not having a car. So whenever I make plans with somebody else, they always like, without me having to like say anything, they're like, I'll come pick you up and then we can go somewhere. That's also another thing is that most of the things in Cleveland proper are like not that far. They're like 15-minute drive tops. So.
Right, so when her boss drove her around the city, it took like 10 minutes to get through the entire downtown and the surrounding area. So it didn't take that long. Yeah. Also, the full-size city at half the price, that also impacts Uber too. So it's like $6 to get anywhere at any given time. So unless it's 2 a.m. on a Saturday, then you might bump it up to 9. But
yeah, super doable.
All right, 2 more questions, and then I want to open up to everyone. This one, kind of switching gears a little bit, what is the thing that frustrates you the most about Cleveland? Akash, you've been here the longest, so I'll let you have that one. Yeah.
I don't, and maybe you can speak to this more than I could, so I will pose the question, maybe you want to answer it, but one of the things I can't understand, being here for 2.5 years, I've loved Cleveland. I'm such a huge advocate for it. There's so much to the city. And it's so fascinating to me to talk to native Clevelanders and like, I don't want to use, I'm trying to find the right word I want to use, but like the idea that I don't find that Clevelanders necessarily would stand on a pedestal and scream about how awesome their city is the way that I think a lot of the transplants that I've met here that have moved here and really loved it. And I think that's something that frustrates me because I feel like Clevelanders maybe need to do a little bit more in terms of really being in people's faces about how awesome Cleveland is, unless you don't want people to come here. So I don't know.
And he figured it out. No. No, we wouldn't be here in front of you if that was the case. Just to touch on that for a second, I think it's a lot of just how you're raised. I was raised to try to be humble with humility and also with the back knowledge of like, hey, wasn't your river on fire in the 70s? And hey, haven't you not won like a major sports thing? And hey, we got it now, okay? Like, and there's just kind of a, hey, yeah, isn't your population, hasn't it been declining since? Yes. All of that is true. So when you're brought up with that background, it does kind of impact the ceiling of how boastful you feel like you should be able to get about something. With that being said, one of the reasons that I joined Venture America and came back to Cleveland instead of going to another city is because I saw the growth and the change that was happening here and I wanted to be a part of it. And so I might be one of a few because I'm in Venture America, but I love shouting praises about Cleveland. I'm always trying to get people here, whether there's one of my friends that works out in Silicon Valley or someone I met in the Taco Bell cantina in Vegas. Like everyone in between, I'm trying to corral them here. But I will agree that there's kind of that backstory that regardless of your age, people do have, they've seen the hastily made Cleveland tourism video or something else that is like, oh, it's just Cleveland, the mistake on the lake, right? And so it takes a lot of continuous improvements. Oh, you've never heard that? Yeah, that's one of the other ones. And some people don't even know we have a lake. But it takes a lot of time to move past that and to really be able to feel comfortable singing the praises of a city. But that's a very great point.
I've got it. So it's hard sometimes to know exactly what it is you're taking for granted until you don't have that anymore. I'm from New York City. Traffic lights in New York City are really good. Traffic lights in Cleveland are not good, like at all. Like there are some traffic lights where you might be sitting for like 2.5 minutes going like, is it broken? I don't know. Like, and then you'll see somebody next to you just go through the red light.
Those are called stop signs.
So that was definitely one of the weird things where I'm sitting here, I'm like, this is taking a long time, like enough that I'm noticing. But it's it's a smaller thing, but it's just one of those things. Like there could be improvements to that, and hopefully, like I don't know how VFA can make that happen. But
someone start a company.
Yeah, I'd say that's definitely true. There's one right by my work that I sit at for like 5 minutes every morning. I should just go a different way, but it's fine. For me, I think, and I grew up in the Midwest, and I went to school in Vermont, so like I'm no stranger to harsh winters. But it is really frustrating sometimes. Like Manisha and I were just like windows rolled down the other day, and she was like, "It's so great to like appreciate spring," and we appreciate it so much because like the winter kind of sucks. And yeah, I don't want to be like too pessimistic about it, but it's true all over the Midwest. Like it's freaking cold, and so that can be frustrating just because it's very long and like there's plenty to do in this city, but some of the most fun stuff to do is like outdoors and walking around and like really seeing things. And when you can't do that, that's frustrating. So I'd say just the length of like the grayness gets kind of aggravating.
It's usually always gray here.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's warm and gray, and those are the great days. Am I selling it?
No. And I mean, I'm from California, and I lived in DC, but like, for the most part, I was like really stressed out about the weather, and I came here and I was like completely fine. Like maybe it's because I was living with Nina and she knew how to drive through snow, but like it's really not that bad. But I would say, and this actually is not really related to Cleveland. I think this is, I don't want to say like it's more of a personal problem, but it could be, in the VFA community. But there are like in my first like 6 months, like I would enter a space and I would be like all the spaces that we would go, and I would be like the only person of color, and that like really bothered me, I think, after a really long time. And I think that is one, I think that we as like a VFA Cleveland community can do a better job like entering into spaces that like bring together like a more diverse group of people, and that is something that I think we as a community are actively trying to do a lot more. That's why we're trying to connect with partners who are involved in the community, and this is something that we have recognized as a problem that we really want to solve. But yeah, I think that like I have recently been really trying to take it upon myself to enter spaces that I think that like people from a bunch of different backgrounds feel are accessible to them, because I think that is something that's very important to me. Yeah, and I think the other thing is like, and you might notice this if you do move to Cleveland, and like at my company, me and the other fellow who works there are the only people who actually live in Cleveland. Like everybody else like commutes in from like neighboring cities. So when they like found out like where I lived, they were like, that's like an extremely dangerous neighborhood. And that like really like shook me, because like I didn't feel that way at all. And I feel like it was based off of like misconceptions and things like that. So I think like having to work with that every day, and even though being a transplant, trying to like advocate for Cleveland as a city and Cleveland as like an amazing, very safe and like very open city, and push back against the bias that I think that's been here. And it's not just unique to Cleveland. Like this happens in like, this is a thing in DC. This is like a thing back like in San Jose. So it's like, I don't think like unique to Cleveland, but at the same time, I think that's something that weighs on me, I think like every day. So yeah.
Yeah. Akash, I know you and I have talked about that before. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Switching gears, always end on a high note. What is the number one thing that you love about being in Cleveland, working here and living here? And please just pour it on.
I've got one. Coming out of, and this will be true for not just Cleveland, but coming out of, like growing up in New York City and then finishing up college, right? I was basically choosing between like I could go work at some tech company in New York City, or I could do VFA if I get in. And I got in and made that choice. And even at a tech salary, living in New York City on my own, I would not have even close to the level of comfort that I have in this city. And even like my brother, when he started, he was at the minimum salary, and he was like very comfortable too, saving a lot of money, like, you know, living happy. And that degree of comfort is, I think, something that I'm not overstating when I say is like a massively important thing. And just being able to, like, you know, like, my bills are gonna be paid, like, if I wanna go out, I can go out, like, if I wanna, you know, travel around a little bit, I can, like, having all these options, just because, like, the cost of living in the city is genuinely very low, I think is a really, really big deal, and something worth considering in the different cities. But
Absolutely. I'm retiring in 2 years. That's how, that's how affordable it is.
You can probably do that here.
I would say, like, kind of on the flip side about what I just answered previously, was that there are like a ton of like amazing, awesome things that are happening in Cleveland, and I feel like there's a sentiment here of like always like encouragement. So I think, like, specifically talking about the startup community, I come from Silicon Valley, and I think that over there, I feel like the startup culture there is that whenever you come up with like an idea, I feel like everybody is always like more on like the critical end of things, and they're always saying, like, trying to shoot it down, trying to ask you like, what's your ROI going to be, like, what's your runway, like, how much investment are you going to get, like, blah blah. Like, I think that even though there's so much entrepreneurship there, I think people are more, I guess, like, judgmental. I don't know. Whereas here in Cleveland, I feel like if you're starting like a software development company, or you're starting like a bagel company, like, the community sees both as like very equally important, and that's, I think, very encouraging, because I feel like I am braver here to take like more entrepreneurial steps in my life that like related to things that I really care about, even if they're not seeming as like financial, like, according to Silicon Valley, like financially, like, I don't know what the word is,
viable,
aspirational or something, yeah, or viable. And I think that's really amazing, because I think it's true. I think that if you want to start a food truck company, or if you want to do something related to software, like, both are equally as important to a community's economy, and I think that a city should see it that way. So,
I would say for me, definitely the community and the people. I don't know, the perseverance of the people of Cleveland is like, the energy that creates in the city is like palpable. I mean, the most, I guess, like, core manifestation of that was like our first day of training camp, like watching Matt like sob on a table after watching the Cavs win it all. But
life-changing.
It's just been so interesting. When I got here, like, I mean, we were like openly embraced. Like, Matt and I have talked about this before. Like, Cleveland's a really tight-knit community, really tight-knit town. Like, you're 1 to 2 connections away from pretty much every person in the city. Like, it's really cool, because you kind of get to access the city at a level that like you could never access in like a New York or San Francisco. And the type of connections you make are like real and genuine. And I think people here are really genuine. And I think that's something that I've really enjoyed. And it's one of those things where, I mean, being here now for 2.5 years, I feel like I'm a Clevelander, like I'm become a part of it in a way that I don't think I could have going to a lot of other cities after graduating. Like, it was almost like Cleveland just like, you're one of us now, and like you just kind of became part of this like group experience, which probably manifests itself most in like a sports context. But there are lots of other situations where like I feel like I'm a Clevelander with the way I access like certain conversations, or even like when I'm outside of Cleveland talking about Cleveland. But then also like being thoughtful about there are people like Matt that are from here, and like their opinions and their thoughts on how Cleveland should improve, and problems that Cleveland have are a lot more important than some VFA fellow that's been living in the city for 2 years. Like, it's important to kind of have a balance, but definitely feel like I'm a Clevelander, and I've really been embraced by the city and the people here.
Great. And I guess I'd say this isn't as like much of an emotional answer as all of yours. You guys all gave really good answers. But for me, like, one thing that's kind of overarched all of the things that I love about this place is just like how manageable it's been to live here. And like, I don't know, I like grew up outside Chicago, which is a very large city, and I went to school in a very rural place, and so I was kind of nervous to like be living in a city for the first time. And we live in like the neighborhoods around downtown. We live in a neighborhood called Detroit Shoreway, and so like we were riding bikes outside the other day, and we like met a bunch of our neighbors and their dogs, and it was like it felt very homey, but also we are like less than a 5-minute drive from downtown. Our commute to work is 15 minutes, and we cross the city. We can bike anywhere. Like, I don't know. It's just been very like those types of things we don't have to think about. We don't have to think really about like how much money it's going to cost to like get transportation somewhere because it's just so cheap around, or how much time. And so we've been able to like focus on other things, which has been really positive for me, and I think has made just kind of the moving to a city experience a lot less stressful.
Cool. And I'll just round it out by saying my favorite part is the fellow community. Being from here and seeing a group of people that are not from here wanting to move to my city to help make it better, to work at companies and help them grow here is like, it gives me chills thinking about it, because it's honestly amazing. Being from a place like this with the history that we have and seeing all these people come and dedicate 2.5+ years of their life to this place and helping it get better, that's my favorite part about it. And the cherry on top is that we have the greatest group of fellows. And I know Venture America might say, don't pit one city against another. I will fight anyone that says otherwise. We have hands down the greatest group of fellows, and I apologize, none of you have accepted jobs anymore yet, no. This is the greatest group of fellows, from the fact that we had weekly dinners for 2 years, every single Sunday night, which is something that you can't get 20-something-year-olds to do anything for 2 years. We did that for 2 years. And our retention from our class and the classes previous is extremely high. People want to be here. People want to be a part of this fellowship. It's really, we take as many as we can, but it's a coveted group because we are so much fun. We are so engaged and involved in the city. It really is. I'm getting animated. I might stand up. But it is a ton of fun. And so I wanted to kind of give you a good perspective on all the different parts of what it's like to live here, because it's not for everyone. But if it does sound appealing to you and you enjoy coming here and talking to people here, we would love to have you, because it is, our network of VFA fellows and the people that we meet and mix our lives with, it's amazing. And I could talk about it all day, but Elizabeth, I have no idea how much time we have.
We have run over, but let's do this. Let's take like 2 questions, and then there are also other Cleveland fellows who are here. We're going to have a happy hour. Feel free to mingle with people. Yeah.
Oh, we're in between them and their drinks? Don't put us in that spot.
Anyway, let's take a couple of questions, and then we'll move out.
Someone
and
over here.
enjoy their refreshments.
Someone's raising their hand, yeah.
I was like raising my hand throughout the whole thing, and then I realized like, oh, like we're gonna ask questions at the end. I think my overarching question, and I'd really love to ask you, like, just like as a woman of color, and from what I'm just garnering from you, like you seem very social justice oriented. So like we're, as VFA fellows, we're going into these awesome cities with emerging markets, and probably the cities have a lot of like revitalization projects, and we're like contributing to that with our talent, with our energy, with our youth, literally. But like I wonder, like when we do go into these cities, like how do we fit into the greater scheme of like gentrification and like isolating talent that's already like born into the city that may get ignored because they are from Cleveland.
Yeah. That's a great question, and I wish I had a good answer for it, but I don't really know if I do. And like, I've only been here for about 6 or 7 months, right? More than that?
7 months.
7 months. So I'm sure Akash and Matt can say a lot more to this. The neighborhood that Nina and I live in is a gentrifying neighborhood, and it started like right before we moved in, and we specifically tried to go into a neighborhood that I guess like fellows didn't really live in, because we wanted to have kind of like a new experience, but it is something that I think that Nina and I talk about like a lot, and it's something that we think about. I think it's hard. I don't have a clear answer for it. One thing that we do like talk about doing and really try and do is think about like where we're spending our money. So I think like Nina, for example, took us to a restaurant that is owned by like a woman of color, and it was like awesome. And I think that like thinking about like what businesses you're trying to support when you're spending money in the city, I think is a great way to have a positive impact. And honestly, I think like listening to people who are from here. So I work with another woman at my company who's a woman of color, and she actually got hired after I moved there. And when we were hiring, we were considering all these people, and I will give props to my company. I think that their founding team was probably not as diverse, but since hiring me and Derek, who's the other fellow there, every single person they've hired after has been a person of color. And I think that's something that they've prioritized. So the woman that I work with is from Cleveland and has done a lot of racial justice work in the city. So I've kind of really tried to let the people who have experiences in Cleveland tell me their narrative. I think that it's hard because there are a ton of people in and around the city that have different experiences, and I think that, and someone told this to us, we met with Third Space Action Labs, which is this is on our neighborhood visit, and they're an awesome organization that does a lot of like social advocacy and like diversity trainings. And one thing that they told me that's really stuck with me is that if someone ever tells you something about a city that seems like negative or unsure, ask them why. Like why do you feel that way about a city? Like why do you feel that way about a community? And eventually you'll get to the root as to like why people make assumptions about certain areas. And that's something that has been really empowering for me, because I think that that's been a really good way for me to try and make opinions of the city and the communities that I'm in come from the voices of people who actually live there, and not necessarily like voices that have made assumptions. But yeah, one of you, please add. I don't want to be the only voice on this.
That was a good answer.
I thought that was great.
Yeah.
Okay.
7 months, look at that. Come to Cleveland.
Let's take one more question. Thank you for that question. It's important. One more.
We got one over here.
Hi everyone. I'd just be interested in hearing a little bit about how big of a factor location played for you after receiving your VFA offer. Just approaching match, were you like Cleveland all the way, or like did you have multiple offers in different cities and you sort of have to weigh pros and cons of different cities, and sort of any advice you have on that?
Yeah, I can speak to this one. I actually started Match not looking at any Midwest cities. I grew up in the Midwest, and I was like, I'm not moving to the Midwest. I'm going to go to New Orleans and love it. And I ended up realizing that that was pretty dumb because I'd never been to any of the VFA cities at all. So it was like completely based off of things that I'd heard. So I was just like, you know what, whatever. And I started applying to things everywhere. And in the end, I was deciding between Philly, Cleveland, and Detroit. And for me, it was really about the role. I mean, the Cleveland fellow community was definitely like an awesome perk, but I wanted to make sure that like every single day I was going to a job that I was excited about. And those priorities are going to be different for everybody, but I don't know. I think that like Cleveland is a really awesome place, but if the role in Philly that I was looking at was one that I really wouldn't have been happy in, and if I had gone there for Philly, I still would have had to do 9 to 5 in that role. So I think that's something to think about. So like if the role here is one that you can really see yourself in, then I would encourage you to strongly consider it.
Yeah, no, I just want to add on. From my own personal experience, when I started, I was mostly looking around, mainly Philly and Baltimore, because I was like, oh, I can take a train, go home, or whatever on the weekends and stuff like that. I don't think that's the right mentality. I think I was definitely wrong in that approach initially, but I also luckily, like one of my other priorities was I wanted to be doing something that I enjoyed as well, and if I couldn't be excited about it, right? Because I kind of knew in my head, right, 9 to 5 is going to be a grind, sort of everywhere. So I may as well make it the most enjoyable grind as possible. But and then I eventually ended up finding a position here that I was really excited about, and I have not regretted it once. But I think looking back at some of the companies I was looking at in Baltimore and Philly, I was doing a lot of bending and twisting to try and get it to work in my head, and I can guarantee those specific companies I would not be happy right now. So.
Yeah, match is like a good relationship. You get out of it what you put in. And so I'm telling you, it's going to be the end of the year or the end of your school year or whatever you have going on. put time and effort into match. Because if you don't, I'm not even gonna tell you, it's a scramble and it's a lot on your plate. If you put in time and effort up front, it becomes way easier to navigate and you're in a way better position. That was something I did, and I actually was like, you know what? I don't want to go to Cleveland. I'm not gonna look at any jobs there. And then part of me was like, why not help my own city? What was I thinking? And it was the perfect world because I ended up finding a role, like everyone talked about, that I thought would be the best for me. And that really is the most important thing, because you're gonna be sitting or standing at a treadmill desk, which is cool, from 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock at least. And you're really gonna want to enjoy the work you're doing and the people you're doing it with. And so that should really, in my opinion, be at the core of your match. And fortunately, we have a lot of great company partners here that you could probably fall in love with once you meet them. But if you're not, my advice would be don't go somewhere just for the city. Although Cleveland is amazing. We should end on that.
We should end on that. Thank you to our Cleveland Fellows. And thank you, John.
Thanks. Thanks for being here. Thank you.
There are also Cleveland Fellows kind of trickling in around. Raise your hand.
Thanks, Dan.
Cleveland Fellows. Yeah, thank you. All right, we have Charlie. What's the drink ticket situation? What should we tell people?
Yeah, I mean, so
They're hidden in Easter eggs.
We'll give you like 2 as you head out, but I would just start, I don't think there's probably not 120 drinks out there, so grab a drink if you want to. Grab a ticket from me or Winston. Winston, say hello. Hi, everyone.
Winston. Yeah, Winston.
Yeah, Winston. Woo!